Welcome to Deep Dive with Esther, where we connect with incredible people, changing the world a brick at a time. It is my honor and privilege to have with us today Patricia Preston on the show. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. And you are running for Lieutenant Governor.
I am, yeah.
And I approve this message. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having me here today. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, so let's dive in because you are a Vermonter.
Yes, yes.
And
From Randolph Center.
Yes. So tell us more about your family.
Oh, yeah. So I am, like I said, I'm from Randolph Center.
Yes.
And on my father's side of the family, we go back many generations. My mother moved here from Massachusetts. They met and fell in love on the farm.
Oh, so sweet.
And I grew up there on a dairy farm in Randolph Center, which, you know, as far as it relates to running for Lieutenant Governor, I think it's been a really interesting perspective to kind of approach everything with. Actually, even my life, my worldview, and my lens as I've traveled the world and the country and the state.
Yes.
And it's just given me a different perspective about just the landscape, our lands, and the different struggles people might face.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of where I'm rooted in, right? And also growing up there, my grandfather was really, really active in the community. And I think my first time ever going to town meeting day was with him.
Yes, when you were 5.
When I was 5, yeah, I was 5. And so my grandfather had this way of like, he was really tall. He was 6 plus,
Yeah.
kind of like a bigger guy. And I remember he'd sit at the town meeting day the whole time, and he'd just kind of sit there and listen. And toward the end, he'd always go, and then he'd stand up and have this, you know, and he'd stand up and he'd just say the most powerful words. And it was so it was deeply impactful on me.
Yeah.
And seeing that when I was 5 and understanding what it meant to use your words and your voice for power for good and to make change in your community was really something special to see, I think, from such a young age.
And I can only imagine that it's influenced who you are today and what you're doing.
100%.
And how you want to change the world.
I do want to change the world.
Yeah. Well, I'm right alongside with you, you know? Yes. Yeah. I love that. I know we met a few months ago, and you reached out, and that I was so honored, first of all, that you reached out.
You're a change maker. You're a change maker, and it's important. And I wanted to connect with you and learn about your experience here, the work that you were doing, and you were really gracious to spend time with me.
Yeah.
and share that with me. So thank you.
And it was wonderful to get to know you, to see your heart, because we had a time where I was asking you some questions. We'll go into the same questions today, but where you were honest and open, and I was like, You hear me, you see me.
Yeah.
And that's who I want to represent us.
That's powerful. It's important.
Yep.
And for me, like, I look at the role of Lieutenant Governor as an office where hearing and seeing and listening are 3 really integral pieces of that role. And so the fact that that's something that you felt when we connected.
Oh, absolutely.
It genuinely means a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So thank you for running.
Yeah.
Okay. But so I know for nearly a decade, you've served as the executive director of a nonprofit. Tell us more.
Yeah. So I have been leading this organization called the Vermont Council on World Affairs. And at the core of all of it is to understand the world and its people so that we can live in a more peaceful and prosperous world. And we do that in a few different ways. But one of those ways is by bringing Vermonters together across the entire state to look at some issues we're facing. And an example of that is just this last Tuesday, we hosted a day-long series on the refugee crisis, and specifically the refugee crisis in Ukraine, or the crisis in Ukraine, and therefore the refugee crisis and that ensues after, as well as what, and we didn't focus on this specifically, but we talked a lot about how this just, Syria, Afghanistan, Ukraine. This is not the first time. This will not be the last time. And we need to, as citizens, be informed, be aware, be engaged, so that a few things can happen, so that we can understand how foreign policy that sometimes feels so far away actually is impacting us here in this state. But the other thing is, when folks start to arrive to Vermont, and hopefully they will from Ukraine, and they have from Afghanistan, when they're arriving, have we created fertile ground for people? Have we created a welcoming environment? Have we created a space where people can receive basic needs and services, but also educational services, pathways for licensure, into job creation, right? And do we have all these things created? Do we have systems in place? And is our community aware and engaged and ready to be a space that's welcoming? Oof. And so, right.
That's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's good.
But that's just like one example of something we did earlier this week. And that's just, wash, rinse, repeat what we're doing, and looking at really these global issues and how they impact us both nationally and locally, statewide as well as hyper-localized, right? And what each community is doing, and we elevate those voices and bring people to the table to be a part of that conversation. Yeah. And we also bring in people from all around the world. We usually bring in like 400 or 500 visitors from around the world annually. And we sit down in small groups and large groups, all different sizes, all around the state. And we look at issues from human trafficking to gender issues, climate action, workforce development, economic opportunity, and different issues that folks might face all around the world, the work that they're doing, and we connect them with Vermonters. Nice. They sit around and engage in civil discourse, and it's people coming from all different backgrounds, all different perspectives, sitting around the table saying, this is what we're facing, this is what we're facing. We might disagree, we might agree. What are the best practices? How can we build consensus? How can we learn and grow from each other? And that's just a small piece of what we do.
Wow. Yeah. Small.
Yeah.
That is amazing. And it also sounds like you developed the skill of bringing people to the table. Yeah. As you mentioned, elevating voices that are different from yours, from different experiences, different backgrounds. Yeah. And to hear that you bring in so many visitors to connect with Vermonters. Yeah. Giving us a piece of the pie of the world.
It's building the cultural fabric. It's building the cultural fabric of the state. And if I think about it, we started this conversation on where am I from, and I'm from Randolph Center. Yes. And if I hadn't been exposed to the world outside of Randolph Center and to other people and perspectives at a really young age, I wouldn't have done the work that I've been doing, and I wouldn't have had the opportunities I've had, because I was able to see a wider slice of what the world is and the opportunities that come from learning about different perspectives.
Yeah. What would you say was like a life-changing in your travels, because you've traveled, and but something that was life-changing to tell you, hey, I want to be a part of this shift outside of, you being 5, but what was something that really told you, okay, public service is the way for me?
I think that I was born
wow.
in my soul.
Yes.
I know that's not, I feel like it's like
yes.
I remember when I was, I was really little, and I've actually never told this story, so this is kind of embarrassing.
I love it. I love it.
And I remember, like, people would say, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I'd be like, well, I'm collecting pennies to save the world.
Oh.
Like, and I thought that, like, collecting pennies was enough, right? But I was really little, and I would, like, pick up pennies on the ground, and I was trying to save, because I thought somehow I could, like, feed everybody through these pennies I was finding, right? And that's mildly embarrassing to share.
Not at all. But, it's beautiful.
But, like, I just really think that, like, and I can talk about, like, more, like, formative things that have happened, but to answer that question most earnestly, it's like, I just think that I was born knowing that what I wanted to do was to serve, community service, and to, no matter what I did or, the method of getting there, I wanted to help people. And for me, once I, moving back here and Vermont, to me, it feels like home, right? And I think that it can be a feeling and a literal thing. And I just wanted to support Vermont and support Vermonters, and help people ultimately since a really young age. And then again, like I said, there was more formative things later on. But,
your community must have been beautiful. you know, to hear, I imagine it's what you saw in your grandfather.
Yeah.
But you taking it and making it personal.
Well, it's like, it's seeing what happens when people come together
Yeah.
and work together, and the change that can really come from that. It's really powerful. And so for me, seeing that modeled, as you say, like in my community, within my family, knowing that I could be a part of that. And also, ultimately, for me, it was also when, you know, I've traveled the state for 10 years with my work, and hearing what was happening, both with the successes, but also with the struggles. And then when COVID hit and everything was completely exacerbated, knowing that I was in a position to do something. And I had this statewide reach, and I had a coalition of people that supported the work that we were doing in the state through the VCWA, supported me, and that I didn't want to wake up in another decade and know that I could have done something and that I didn't. And so that led me in this particular path to lieutenant governor. But I mean, I think it's been longstanding in my career with education, nonprofit work, doing work with women and girls around the world, and then coming back and doing the work with the Vermont Council, and now running for lieutenant governor.
Yeah, it's in your soul.
It's in my soul.
That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
It's in your soul.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you listened.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you could have said no.
It's true.
And I'm glad you didn't. Wow, that's amazing. So I know we've discussed civil discourse.
Yeah.
So what would that look like if you were to be elected? What would that look like?
So, you know, so I mentioned I was a teacher.
Yes.
And I think that, you know, you're a mother, so you might get this example. Is I think that the way that we engage in civil, or the way that we bring people along in civil discourse, is first to model it, right? We want to model the behavior that we want others. We're going to model the behavior for our children, or for our students, or for others, or for me, seeing service modeled in my grandfather and my community, right? I got engaged in that way.
Yes.
And so where the starting point is saying, you know, I think sometimes we think in Vermont we're immune from a lot of things, and we're not.
That's good. That's good. Yeah.
And so for me, it's like, okay, so let's have the conversation. Let's bring these conversations to the table, and let's model how we can engage in these conversations in a really meaningful way. And so how that's worked for me in the past at the Vermont Council is all of the small round tables and people coming from all around the world. And we're the Vermont Council is apolitical, nonpartisan. So we're bringing together Republicans, Independents, Libertarians, Progressives, Democrats, everybody that's at the table for these conversations. And when we bring in folks from around the world, we're bringing in a lot of other political parties.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
And so to have these conversations around the state that are engaging in Vermont's most pressing issues, I've been facilitating these for a long time. And you basically have this set standard of, if you're respectful, if you are coming to the table honestly, earnestly, and being open, then we can engage in almost any topic in every conversation. And we don't always you know, agree 100% at the end of the day, or when we leave on best practices or a solution, but we move forward and make progress in consensus building, or at least a heightened and higher understanding of the other people we're sitting in the room with and at the table with. Wow. And for me, I think if we can have someone in Montpelier, and I know that there are people there that already feel this way, but I think in the Lieutenant Governor's office, having someone who has a decade of experience of doing this, bringing people to the table, elevating their voices, I think that the Lieutenant Governor's office is a really unique role to do more of that, and to really bring these voices in, and diverse perspectives and voices to sit at the table where we're going to ultimately disagree, right, on certain things, but to have civil discourse there is really important.
I love it. No, I think it's so important, and you're right. This is a unique, the Lieutenant Governor's office is a place where you can do that. Yeah. And do that in a fresh and a new way. And with all that you've done over this past decade, and the connections you've made, the people you know all around the state, bringing us together. And I say us because I'm a Vermonter too. Yay! No, just, I'm excited. Yeah. I'm excited. I'm really excited.
And I do think that that's something that might be newer for some Vermonters, right? And I think that I bring a unique perspective as well, also being really deeply rooted in one of our more rural communities, and also having done work around the world and living in one of the more urban centers, and being able to have my foot in both worlds, to be able to help that conversation, I actually think is another unique perspective that I can offer of service to this conversation.
Yeah. I agree. I agree. I'm taking it all in.
Yeah.
And just imagining what that would look like, and the potential for just different people around the state to feel heard in that way. How we can have folks believe in the democracy again. Because I think, from what I see in my little purview, it seems like some folks don't want to engage, don't feel like their voices matter. And when you bring and tap into different folks who may not be, but even you asking, or even you bringing folks to the table, I think, I know will breathe hope in a fresh way.
Hope that's the right word, I think. Because when I say we're not immune from these things in Vermont, like, part of what I'm talking about is, like, I do think democracy is at risk. And part of it is because of this divisiveness, or people not wanting to come to the table, right?
Yeah.
And if we watch what happened on January 6th, like that stuff's scary, right?
Yes.
And so for me, where I find hope is in deciding to run.
Yes.
And deciding to run because I know that some people might be hesitant to come to the table or have that conversation.
Yes.
But I think it's important that we have people trying.
Yes.
You know, and that's what I'm going to be able to do. And I'm going to be able to try to bring the voices in, to get these folks to the table, and really have truly inclusive conversations.
I'm here for it.
Yeah.
I'm here for it.
And I think, to add on to it, like, I think as someone coming in with a fresh perspective, I actually think that will help bring more people to the table. Because I think some of those people you mentioned that might feel like a little bit more disenfranchised or out of the loop, part of that is the process is cumbersome, and what politics or Montpelier means to them. And I think coming in and saying, hey, listen, that's not my background. I don't have a long-standing political background, which is also a very, that's great too, if that's your background, right? But I think that some people might be able to engage with me in a different way and be receptive to it in that role of bringing people together.
Yeah, I can see it. The visionary me can see it. I love it, and so excited for you. So, I'll wrap it up with this question, and then I can just talk to you. So I know whoever the governor is, having someone, wherever you stand, right, you're going to have people at the table that you don't maybe necessarily agree with. And I'm not saying that you don't agree with the governor. I'm just saying that you're coming to a table with so many different perspectives. How do you bring people together? How do you get folks to listen?
Yeah. So that's kind of why I'm saying I'm really uniquely qualified for this position, because I do think that that's a role of the lieutenant governor, and bringing people together to listen is genuinely what I've been doing for a decade.
Yes.
And so I could go back to, I could model it, right? We could, but ultimately it comes back to setting a space that's respectful and inclusive and representative of multiple voices at a table. And when you have that, you have the beginnings of where good civil discourse starts, right? And so for me, it's bringing that background in fostering good civil discourse to the table, is how we engage in those conversations. And I think some of that does happen already in Montpelier, I don't think we're void of good civil discourse. I think we have it. I just think that it could be more inclusive. And I think that Good civil discourse also at its root just comes from being respectful of the people that you're sitting around the table of. So, so I may be sitting across from someone that I vehemently disagree with.
Yes.
But I'm going to listen to you.
Yes.
And I'm going to respect you.
Yes.
And I'm going to let your voice be heard.
Yes.
Right? And my response to you is going to be disagreeing respectfully.
Yes.
You know, and I think that that's just the starting point of that. And I think that also means, so it's being respectful, but also looking around the room and saying, so who's missing from this conversation, and who else do we have to bring in to have true discourse on any given topic? And then just set the space and tone of it being respectful with those new voices as well.
I love it. Yes. Yes, it's having that respect. It's still listening.
Yeah.
And knowing that the other party, other person, they contribute something.
Yeah, of course. And when I say diverse perspectives, like that also means just someone from a different party.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like,
yes.
Because I think so, again, so long as we can be respectful with the words that we're using and respectful to the people around the table, you could have the most opposite opinion from me that could ever exist, so long as you're being thoughtful and kind in your language, right? And if that is the case, and that can be true, and we can maintain that, we can move forward on anything because we're willing to listen to each other and hear each other. And if there's respect, there can also be a non-judgment there too, right? On whatever it is this person's trying to say. If you're being respectful and thoughtful and kind, there can be consensus building.
All right. I love it.
Yeah.
And my final question. So what is your biggest dream for Vermont?
Oh. That is a doozy of a final question.
I'm sorry.
I look at when I started this whole thing, and I was kind of sitting down with, looking at what I wanted from Vermont. I just kept on saying, I want Vermont to live up to its promise. And there's so much promise in this state. And we also say there's this promise, right, of a lifestyle and things that we're not always living up to for every person here. And so for me, I want Vermont to live up to the promise of Vermont, right? Live up to all of its potential. And that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And to me, that means a place where people's needs are being met, and that we have many voices coming to the table to decide what that is, because it means so many different things to different people. So I don't want to prescribe like a one shoe fits all here. Yeah. But I want Vermont to be able to live up to its promise. And we could get into if I was going to get policy specific, we could look at climate action.
Ooh,
we could look at affordability with access to high quality, affordable childcare, as well as housing, and then strengthening our rural economies and communities. And that means strengthening our workforce, right? And so there's so many different pieces and elements to that. But those would be some of the core things that are all very intersectional. And my biggest thing is, and why it's so hard for me to answer that question with just one pinpoint, is that I just don't think that the things we need to address can be addressed in a silo, and we cannot just address one of them, and there's not just one thing we need to tackle. All of this stuff is intersectional, and it needs to be looked at it as such. And so for me, it would just be let's live up to our promise, and let's address these issues and look at them holistically. And as I've traveled around the state and I've been going to all of these towns, what I'm seeing is people in each town addressing these issues with different services that are holistic. And they're like, actually, there's 6 different programs in this one building, and we're working together. And it's really inspiring to see. And I want to take some of these things I'm seeing around the state and say, this is a statewide model that we can look at and use and address these things. And to me, that's when a part of the elevating voices and folks across the state that I'm seeing too, like who's doing this good work? How can we elevate this good work and approach these issues that we're facing as a state holistically?
I love it.
That was a lot for the one thing I want to do for this tape, but
no, it's wonderful, and it's brick by brick.
It's brick by brick.
Brick by brick.
It's true.
And I'm grateful you're running. I'm so glad you were here. Thank you for taking a deep dive with Esther.